A dream of the North Pole. You've set down your phone at last. The final email sent. The last fire extinguished for today. Your body knows it's time to rest. But your mind is still calculating, still planning, still carrying the weight of what you're building. Tonight, let me take you somewhere far from the endless notifications and quarterly projections. Let me tell you about a man who dreamed of floating above the world itself. Picture, if you will, the crisp Stockholm air of 1896. Gas lamps flicker against windows frosted with winter breath, and in a modest apartment overlooking the harbor, a man named Salomon August Andrée spreads maps across his desk. But these aren't ordinary maps showing roads or railways. These are charts of emptiness, vast white spaces marked simply unexplored. At their heart lies the North Pole, that mathematical point where all meridians converge, where no human foot has ever touched the ice. André runs his finger across the blank expanse, and his eyes hold that particular gleam you might recognize, the same light that burns in your own eyes when you see possibility where others see impossibility. He is 42 years old, chief engineer at the Swedish Patent Office, a man of precision and measurement. Yet tonight, he dreams of floating through the Arctic sky like a cloud. The North Pole in 1896 represents more than geography. It is the last great terrestrial mystery, the final blank space on the map of human knowledge. Expeditions have tried and failed, their ships crushed in the ice, their men lost to the endless white. Some have come tantalizingly close. Fridtjof Nansen pushed further north than any before him, but even he fell short of that ultimate prize. The pole remains unconquered, untouched, unknown. But André has conceived something unprecedented. While others plan to trudge across the ice with dogs and sleds, fighting every mile against the Arctic's fury, he will simply float above it all. His weapon against the unconquerable North will be a balloon. Not just any balloon, but a marvel of engineering that will carry him and two companions over the polar ice in a matter of days, drifting serenely above the chaos below. Can you imagine the audacity of such a dream? In an age when flight itself is still fantasy, when the Wright brothers are still bicycle mechanics dreaming of wings, André proposes to navigate the most hostile environment on Earth from a wicker basket suspended beneath silk and hydrogen. His friends call it genius. His critics call it suicide. Perhaps both are correct. The balloon he envisions will be enormous, nearly 100 feet in diameter when inflated, containing enough hydrogen to lift not just 3 men, but supplies for months, scientific instruments, cameras to document their triumph, even carrier pigeons to send news of their success back to a waiting world. The silk envelope will be varnished with a secret mixture to hold the precious gas, and most ingeniously, it will carry drag ropes, long lines that will trail across the ice below, allowing the balloon to be steered by the friction of rope against snow. In the lamplit drawing rooms of Stockholm's Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, André presents his plan with the quiet confidence of a man who has calculated every variable. The prevailing winds blow from southwest to northeast across the Arctic Ocean. His balloon will catch these aerial rivers and ride them directly over the pole, mapping the unknown regions below, taking measurements, photographs, scientific observations that will revolutionize humanity's understanding of the Arctic. The room falls silent as he speaks. These are serious men, scientists and explorers who understand the magnitude of what he proposes. Some lean forward, caught by the elegant simplicity of the plan. Others sit back, perhaps thinking of all the things that could go wrong when you trust your life to wind and silk at the top of the world. But Andrée's conviction is infectious. Here is a new kind of exploration, he argues. Clean, swift, scientific. No brutal marches across broken ice. No men dying of scurvy in the polar night. Just a gentle ascent into the Arctic sky, and a triumphant drift to glory. The Academy votes to support him. Funding follows. King Oscar II himself blesses the expedition. The dream begins to take physical form. As 1896 unfolds into spring, Andrée assembles his crew. First comes Niels Strindberg, just 24 years old, a physicist and photographer whose enthusiasm burns as bright as Andrée's own. Strindberg brings youth and technical skill, but more than that, he brings absolute faith in their mission. When others express doubt, Strindberg speaks of the photographs he will take from above the pole, images no human eye has ever seen. The second companion is Knut Frenkel, a civil engineer whose steady competence balances Strindberg's enthusiasm and Andrée's visionary fervor. Frenkel understands construction, logistics, the 1,000 practical details that separate dreams from reality. He looks at Andrée's calculations and sees not fantasy, but engineering. Together, these three men will attempt what no one has ever dared. The balloon itself takes shape in a workshop in Paris, crafted by the finest aeronauts in Europe. They call it the Eagle, a name that speaks to soaring ambition and national pride. When completed, it will be one of the largest balloons ever constructed, a silk giant capable of remaining aloft for weeks. Every seam is double-stitched, every rope tested to breaking point. The Eagle represents the pinnacle of 1890s aeronautical engineering, humanity's most sophisticated attempt to conquer the sky. But even as the Eagle nears completion, whispers of doubt echo through the scientific community. Balloon flight, they murmur, is still more art than science. The Arctic weather is notoriously unpredictable. What if the winds shift? What if the balloon comes down on the ice hundreds of miles from rescue? What if the hydrogen leaks away in the bitter cold, leaving three men stranded at the top of the world? Andrée dismisses such concerns with the quiet confidence of a man who has done his mathematics. He has studied wind patterns, calculated gas expansion rates, planned for every contingency. The Eagle will succeed where brute force expeditions have failed, because it works with nature rather than against it. Like the Arctic terns that migrate from pole to pole on tireless wings, they will use the sky itself as their highway. As summer approaches, preparations intensify. The expedition's base will be Danes Island in Svalbard, that remote archipelago where the ice-free season lasts mere weeks. There, they will inflate the Eagle and wait for favorable winds. The balloon house is already under construction. A massive wooden hangar that will shelter their silk giant from the Arctic storms. Strindberg tests his cameras obsessively, knowing that the photographs he takes may be the only proof of their achievement. Frenkel studies maps and weather charts, memorizing every detail of the route ahead. And Andrée stands at his window overlooking Stockholm harbor, watching the ships come and go, his mind already floating high above the polar ice. The weight of expectation grows heavier each day. Newspapers across Europe trumpet the coming expedition. The Swedish public follows every detail with patriotic fervor. Scientists worldwide debate the mission's chances in learned journals. King Oscar speaks of the glory that will reflect on Sweden when Andrée plants the national flag at the North Pole. But perhaps, in the quiet moments before sleep, each man contemplates the enormity of what they're attempting. To trust their lives to wind and silk, to drift beyond the reach of rescue into the planet's most unforgiving wilderness. It requires a particular kind of courage, or perhaps a particular kind of madness. The line between the two has always been thin when it comes to those who push beyond the known world. The Eagle waits in Paris, carefully packed in crates for shipment north. Soon, it will make the journey to Svalbard, where Arctic winds will test every calculation, every assumption, every dream. 3 men prepare to entrust their lives to hydrogen and hope, to chase immortality across the roof of the world. The stage is set. The players have taken their positions. All that remains is for the Eagle to spread its silk wings and carry 3 dreamers into the endless Arctic sky, toward a destiny that none of them can yet imagine. Donskoy and the launch of the Urnen. The summer of 1897 finds us on Donskoy, a small island in the Svalbard archipelago, where the midnight sun casts everything in an ethereal golden light that never fades. Here, 800 miles from the North Pole, Andrée has established his launch site, a place where the weight of preparation meets the moment of truth. The landscape is both beautiful and unforgiving. Barren hills rise from shores lined with driftwood, polished smooth by countless Arctic storms. The air carries the scent of sea spray and something else, something clean and sharp that speaks of vast emptiness beyond the horizon. This is the edge of the known world, where maps fade into speculation and hope becomes the only compass. For weeks now, the 3 men have worked with methodical precision, assembling their balloon house, a massive wooden structure that will shelter the Urnen during inflation. Each timber has been carefully positioned, each joint secured against the Arctic wind that tests everything human ambition dares to build here. The balloon itself emerges slowly, like some great creature awakening from slumber. Bolt by bolt, seam by seam, the silk envelope takes shape within its protective housing. Andrée moves around it with the careful attention of someone whose entire future hangs in the balance. Checking, measuring, calculating. Every fold must be perfect. Every connection must hold. There will be no second chances once they leave this shore. Strindberg, ever the optimist, documents everything with his camera and careful notes. His letters to Anna speak of excitement, of the approaching moment when they will step into the basket and trust ourselves to the wind. But there's something else in his words, a tenderness that suggests he understands the magnitude of what they're attempting. The weight he carries isn't just scientific equipment and provisions, it's the knowledge that this may be the last letter she ever receives from him. Frankel works with quiet determination, his engineer's mind focused on the practical details that will either save them or doom them. The drag ropes that will help steer their course, the provisions carefully packed in waterproof containers, the emergency equipment that no one wants to think about using. He carries the weight of knowing that in the Arctic, the smallest oversight can become a death sentence. As the days pass, the balloon takes on a life of its own. The hydrogen slowly fills the silk envelope, and the Urnen begins to strain against the ropes that hold it earthbound. It moves with each breath of wind, a restless giant eager to be free. The sight of it, this impossible marriage of silk and science, fills the men with both pride and a kind of vertigo. They have built something magnificent. Whether they have built something that will carry them to glory or to their graves remains to be seen. The weather becomes their master now. Day after day, they wait for the right wind, a southerly breeze that will carry them north toward their destiny. Each morning brings new hope. Each evening brings new frustration. The Arctic summer is brief, and with every passing day, their window of opportunity grows smaller. Then, on the morning of July 11th, 1897, the wind shifts. It comes from the south. Steady, reliable, promising. Andrée feels it on his face and knows immediately that this is their moment. After months of preparation, years of planning, decades of dreaming, the time has come to discover whether human ingenuity can conquer the unconquerable. The final preparations unfold with the strange mixture of haste and ceremony that marks all great departures. Last-minute checks of equipment, final letters posted to loved ones who may never see them again, handshakes with the support crew who will watch them disappear into the Arctic sky, and then wait, and wonder, and hope for news that may never come. The basket hangs beneath the balloon like a wicker cradle, loaded with everything three men might need to survive in the most hostile environment on Earth. Scientific instruments nestle beside tins of food. Cameras share space with emergency flares. Hope travels alongside fear in every carefully packed crate. As they climb into the basket, each man carries his own weight of expectation. Andrée, the visionary who has staked his reputation on this moment. Strindberg, the young scientist trading the certainty of a conventional life for the chance to touch immortality. Frankel, the engineer who has calculated every risk and chosen to embrace them all. The ropes are released one by one. The urnin rises slowly, majestically, carrying its precious cargo up and away from the solid certainty of land. Below them, Donskoy grows smaller. Ahead of them, the Arctic Ocean stretches endlessly toward the pole, toward whatever fate awaits three men who dared to chase the impossible. The last earthbound observers watch until the balloon becomes a speck against the pale Arctic sky. And then, nothing at all. The silence that follows is profound. The silence of a world holding its breath, waiting to learn whether dreams can indeed carry us beyond the boundaries of what we thought possible. The urnin flies north, carrying its crew toward a destiny written in wind and ice. Aloft and adrift, and so they rise. Three souls suspended between earth and heaven in their silk cathedral of ambition. The urnin climbs steadily through the Arctic air, her envelope full and proud against the endless sky. Below them, the landscape transforms into something beyond earthly comprehension, a world of white and blue that stretches to the very edges of imagination. Andrée stands in the basket, his hands gripping the rim, watching as the familiar becomes foreign, as the known world shrinks to a memory beneath them. Perhaps you understand this feeling, this moment when you've committed to a path that cannot be undone. When the emails are sent, the decisions made, the course set. There's a peculiar mixture of exhilaration and terror in such moments. The weight you carry suddenly both lighter and heavier than before. From their aerial perch, the three men gaze down upon a realm few human eyes have witnessed. The pack ice spreads below them like a vast broken mirror, sheets of white separated by leads of dark water that snake through the frozen landscape like veins in marble. The beauty is overwhelming, almost painful in its purity. Strindberg, the young photographer, works feverishly with his camera equipment. His movements are careful, deliberate. Each photograph a precious document of this impossible journey. The wind tugs at his hair as he adjusts his lens, capturing images that may be the last record of their passage through this white wilderness. Frankel tends to the balloon systems with the methodical precision of a man who understands that their lives depend on silk and gas and the delicate mathematics of buoyancy. He checks the drag ropes, measures their altitude, records the wind direction in his careful script. Every detail matters now. Every variable could mean the difference between triumph and something else entirely. The silence up here is profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through the rigging and the occasional creak of the wicker basket. It's the silence of vast spaces, of distances that humble human ambition. The kind of silence that finds you in your own moments of isolation, when the weight of what you're building feels both magnificent and impossibly heavy. Hours pass like dreams. The sun, hanging low in the Arctic sky, casts long shadows across the ice below. Time moves differently here, measured not in the familiar rhythms of civilization, but in the slow dance of wind and weather. The men eat sparingly from their carefully rationed supplies, drink tea that tastes of adventure and uncertainty, but gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, something begins to change. Frankel notices it first in his instruments. The balloon's altitude is not holding as it should. They're losing height, slowly but steadily. He checks his calculations, adjusts what can be adjusted, but the descent continues. The Urnin is bleeding hydrogen, precious gas escaping through seams stressed by the Arctic cold. Andrée maintains his composure, but you can see the calculations running behind his eyes. Every foot of altitude lost is a mile less distance they might travel. Every cubic meter of gas escaped is a step closer to the ice below. The mathematics of their situation are becoming complicated. The drag ropes, designed to trail across the ice and provide steering, begin to accumulate weight. Ice forms along their length, crystal by crystal, ounce by ounce. What was meant to be their means of control becomes an anchor, pulling them inexorably downward. And still, they fly north, but lower now, close enough to hear the grinding song of the pack ice, the deep groans and cracks as massive sheets of frozen ocean shift and collide. It's a sound that speaks of forces beyond human reckoning, of a landscape that cares nothing for their dreams or their carefully laid plans. The temperature drops as evening approaches, though in this land of midnight sun, evening is more a state of mind than a position of the clock. The cold seeps through their layers of wool and fur, finds its way into the basket, where they huddle together for warmth. Their breath forms clouds that freeze and fall like tiny snow. Strindberg continues his photography, but his movements are slower now, fingers stiff with cold despite his gloves. Each image he captures shows the ice drawing closer, the perspective shifting from the godlike view of eagles to something more human, more vulnerable. The balloon's envelope, once taut and proud, begins to show the stress of its journey. Ice crystals form along the silk, tiny jewels that catch the Arctic light, but add weight with every passing hour. The Urnin is becoming heavy with the very element they sought to conquer, transformed from a creature of air into something earthbound. Frankel's logbook entries grow shorter, more urgent, altitude decreasing, gas pressure dropping, ice accumulation significant. The clinical language cannot hide the growing concern, the recognition that their carefully planned expedition is becoming something else entirely. An improvisation, a test of human resilience against forces they had perhaps underestimated. And yet, there's something magnificent in their persistence. Even as the balloon struggles, even as the ice reaches up toward them with crystalline fingers, they continue north. The dream that launched them from Donskoye still pulls them forward, still whispers of the pole waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. The Arctic landscape below shifts and changes, leads of open water appearing and disappearing like thoughts in a restless mind. Pressure ridges thrust upward where ice sheets collide, creating mountain ranges of frozen chaos that stretch for miles. It's a world in constant motion, beautiful and terrible, and utterly indifferent to the three men drifting overhead. As the hours pass and the balloon continues its slow descent, a new reality begins to take shape. This may not be the triumphant flight to the pole they had envisioned, but it is becoming something else. A test of human courage against the vast indifference of the Arctic. A story written in ice and wind and the stubborn refusal to surrender dreams. Even when those dreams begin to take forms we never expected. The Urnin flies on, lower now, heavier, but still carrying its crew toward whatever destiny awaits in the white silence ahead. Forced down, the ice rises to meet them like an ancient, patient adversary. What began as distant white beneath their basket now fills their vision. A landscape of ridges and valleys carved from frozen seawater, stretching endlessly in every direction. The Urnin, once proud and buoyant, now scrapes against the tallest pressure ridges with sounds that speak of finality. Andrée stands in the basket, one hand gripping the rigging, watching their dream transform before his eyes. The balloon that was to carry them in triumph to the pole now drags across the ice like a wounded creature seeking refuge. Each contact with the surface sends vibrations through the basket, a rhythm that marks the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. "We must prepare for landing," he calls to his companions, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that seemed impossible just hours before. The pole, that mathematical point that had consumed their thoughts and planning for years, suddenly feels not closer, but infinitely distant. Yet there is something in his tone, not defeat, but adaptation. The kind of quiet strength that emerges when circumstances strip away everything except what truly matters. Strindberg moves methodically through their equipment, his photographer's eye already cataloging what they will need, what they can carry, what must be left behind. The cameras, yes. The scientific instruments, certainly. But the silk and varnish that gave them flight? That beautiful, impossible dream of soaring over the Arctic? That will remain here, a monument to ambition meeting reality on the endless ice. Frankel checks their position one final time, though the numbers on his instruments now serve a different purpose. No longer calculating their glorious arrival at 90 degrees north, but rather their distance from safety, from the supply depots they had so carefully arranged, from the world that expects their return. The mathematics of survival replace the mathematics of triumph. The final landing comes not with drama, but with an almost gentle resignation. The basket settles onto a relatively flat section of ice, the balloon fabric spreading around them like the wings of some great bird finally come to rest. For a moment, the three men simply stand there, breathing the sharp Arctic air, listening to the profound silence that follows the end of flight. It is Andrée who speaks first, his words measured and deliberate. "Gentlemen, we have not reached our intended destination, but we have traveled farther by balloon over the Arctic than any men before us. That achievement, that knowledge, remains ours regardless of what comes next." There is wisdom in his response to this moment of profound disappointment. How often do we measure ourselves only by the goals we set, forgetting to acknowledge the courage it took to begin the journey at all? You understand this, lying there in the darkness, carrying the weight of your own unreached destinations, the targets missed, the timelines extended, the pivots that felt like failures until time revealed them as necessary course corrections. The work of salvage begins immediately, not just of equipment and supplies, but of purpose itself. They cannot fly to the pole, but they can walk toward home. They cannot complete their planned expedition, but they can write a different story, one of adaptation and endurance, and the quiet heroism of continuing when the original plan crumbles. Strindberg documents their new reality with the same careful attention he had given to their preparations. The balloon spread across the ice, the basket that carried their hopes now serving as a temporary shelter. The three figures moving purposefully through their transformed circumstances, already beginning the mental shift from aeronauts to Arctic travelers. The supplies they can carry tell the story of their new priorities. Food for the long journey ahead. Scientific instruments, because the pursuit of knowledge continues regardless of how that knowledge is gathered. Navigation tools, now more crucial than ever. And the cameras, always the cameras, because someone must bear witness to what they are about to attempt. The ice beneath their feet stretches in every direction. A white ocean frozen in time, carved by winds and currents into a landscape that seems almost alive. Pressure ridges rise like walls, some reaching 20 feet or more. Barriers that will test their strength and ingenuity. Between these ridges lie fields of broken ice, chunks and slabs that shift and groan with the movement of the pack. But there is beauty here too, terrible and magnificent beauty that few human eyes have witnessed. The way the low Arctic sun catches the edges of ice crystals, turning the entire landscape into something that seems carved from diamonds. The profound silence that exists nowhere else on Earth. A quiet so complete it seems to have weight and presence of its own. Andrée studies their maps with new eyes. The routes they had planned for supply drops and rescue operations now become their lifeline home. Cape Flora, where they had arranged for provisions. Franz Josef Land, where ships might still be waiting. These destinations, once mere contingencies, now represent their only path back to the world they left behind. The distance is sobering. Hundreds of miles across ice that moves and shifts with currents and wind. Terrain that can change overnight, opening leads of dark water or building new barriers of jumbled ice blocks. A journey that will test every skill they possess, and some they have yet to discover. Yet there is something remarkable in how they approach this new reality. No recriminations about the balloon's failure. No desperate clinging to their original plan. Instead, a quiet acceptance of circumstances combined with an immediate focus on what must be done next. This is leadership in its purest form. The ability to adapt when everything changes, to find new purpose when old dreams prove impossible. Frankel begins calculating their rations, determining how far their food might carry them, and where they might supplement their supplies. The Arctic, harsh as it is, does offer possibilities for those with knowledge and skill. Seals that surface at breathing holes in the ice, polar bears that might be hunted if necessity demands. The careful balance between calories consumed and energy expended that will determine their fate. As they work, the balloon fabric moves gently in the Arctic breeze, a reminder of what brought them here and what must now be left behind. There is something profound in watching these men transition from one identity to another. No longer the bold aeronauts who launched from Donskoy, but not yet the hardened ice travelers they must become. They exist in this moment of transformation, this space between what was planned and what must be endured. The weight they carry now is different from the weight that brought them here. No longer the pressure of public expectation and scientific ambition, but the more immediate burden of survival and the responsibility they bear to each other. 3 men alone on the ice, dependent on their combined knowledge, strength, and determination to see another sunrise beyond this frozen wilderness. You know something of this weight, this moment when circumstances force a complete reevaluation of everything you thought you knew about your path forward. When the strategies that seemed so clear in planning meet the reality of implementation and prove insufficient. When adaptation becomes not just helpful, but essential for survival. Their first night on the ice approaches, and with it, the reality of their new existence. No longer passengers in flight, but travelers on foot across one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The tent they erect serves as more than shelter. It becomes their first act of defiance against the vastness that surrounds them. A declaration that they will not simply surrender to circumstance, but will fight for their return with every skill and resource they possess. The Arctic night descends slowly, painting the ice in shades of blue and silver that seem to exist nowhere else in nature. Inside their tent, the 3 men share a meal and begin planning for the morning, for the first steps of a journey that will test everything they believe about themselves and each other. Tomorrow, they will begin walking south, toward safety, toward home, toward an uncertain future that depends entirely on their ability to endure what the ice demands of them. But tonight, they rest as men who have already achieved something remarkable, who have flown farther over the Arctic than anyone before them, who have touched their dream even if they could not fully grasp it. The Urnin rests silent on the ice around them, no longer their vessel of flight, but now their shelter and the source of materials they will need for the journey ahead. Dreams, it seems, have a way of transforming rather than simply ending, becoming something different from what we imagined, but no less meaningful for that transformation. The long walk on the ice. And so they begin to walk. 3 figures moving slowly across an endless white expanse that stretches beyond the horizon in every direction. The morning of July 22nd brings them to their feet, to the work of survival, to the long journey that will test everything they carry within themselves. Picture them, if you will. Andrée leading with his characteristic determination, his beard already gathering frost crystals in the Arctic air. Behind him, young Strindberg pulls his sledge with the steady rhythm of someone who has found his pace, while Frenkel brings up the rear, methodical and careful, ensuring nothing is left behind. Each man carries roughly 200 pounds of supplies: food, scientific instruments, ammunition, the camera that will document their journey, and the weight of knowing that every step takes them either closer to safety or deeper into the vast unknown. The ice beneath their feet tells its own story. A constantly shifting landscape of pressure ridges and leads of dark water, of smooth patches that seem to promise easy travel before giving way to chaos. Sometimes they walk on ice so thick and solid, it feels like walking on stone. Other times, they hear the ominous creaking and groaning that speaks of movement far below, of forces beyond human comprehension reshaping their world, even as they try to cross it. In Strindberg's diary, written by the light of the midnight sun, we find these words: "The ice is not what we expected. It moves, it breathes, it seems almost alive beneath us. But we adapt. We find our rhythm. We discover what we can endure." How familiar that sounds to anyone who has faced the unexpected, who has found their carefully laid plans transformed by forces beyond their control. The weight you carry, the responsibility for others, for the vision you're building, it teaches you this same lesson. That adaptation is not failure. It is perhaps the most human skill of all. The days blur into one continuous cycle of effort, breaking camp in what passes for morning in this land of endless light, loading the sledges with practiced efficiency, then beginning the slow progress across terrain that changes with each step. Sometimes they make good time across relatively smooth ice, covering perhaps 2 miles in a day of back-breaking work. Other days, they struggle for hours to advance a few hundred yards, hauling their sledges up and over pressure ridges that rise like frozen mountain ranges some 20 feet high or more. Frankel writes of these obstacles with the precision of an engineer. Today, we encountered a ridge system that required us to unload each sledge completely, carry the supplies piece by piece to the other side, then haul the empty sledges up and over. The work took 6 hours to advance perhaps 50 yards, but we advance nonetheless. There is something profound in that simple statement. But we advance nonetheless. How many times have you faced your own version of that pressure ridge? An obstacle that seemed insurmountable, a problem that required you to break everything down to its component parts and rebuild your approach entirely? The long walk across the ice teaches the same lesson that building anything meaningful teaches, that progress is not always measured in miles covered, but in the simple fact of continuing forward. The cold is their constant companion. Not the sharp, clean cold of a winter morning, but something deeper and more penetrating. It seeps through their wool clothing, finds every gap in their defenses, turns their breath to ice crystals that coat their beards and freeze their mustaches to their faces. Their hands, even protected by thick mittens, grow numb during the long hours of hauling. Yet they must retain enough dexterity to handle ropes, to make camp, to operate the instruments that record their position. But listen to how Andrée describes it in his journal. The cold is not our enemy. It is simply the condition in which we work. Like a craftsman who learns to work with difficult materials, we learn to work with this cold, to respect it, to understand its patterns, to find warmth in our effort and in each other's company. There is wisdom in this acceptance, this refusal to waste energy fighting what cannot be changed. The weight you carry often comes with its own kind of cold. The isolation of leadership, the chill of uncertainty, the way responsibility can sometimes feel like it freezes the warmth right out of your bones. But like these 3 men on the ice, you learn that the cold is not your enemy. It is simply the condition in which you work. Their food becomes a careful calculation, each meal measured against the distance still to travel, each calorie weighed against the energy needed to haul their supplies across the unforgiving terrain. They supplement their rations with seal meat when they can find it. Frankel proving surprisingly adept with the rifle, bringing down seals that venture too close to the ice edge. The fresh meat is not just nutrition. It is hope made tangible, proof that the ice can sustain them if they remain alert to its possibilities. Strindberg writes of these small victories with touching gratitude. Today, we feast on fresh seal. The taste reminds us that we are not separate from this place, but part of it. The ice provides, if we know how to receive its gifts. How often do we forget this lesson in our own long walks? That sustenance comes not just from what we carry with us, but from what we discover along the way. The weight you're carrying, the vision you're building, it requires this same ability to remain open to unexpected nourishment, to find strength in sources you hadn't planned for. The nights bring their own challenges, and their own strange beauty, setting up camp on ice that might shift beneath them while they sleep, arranging their sleeping bags in the tent salvaged from the balloon's fabric. But they also bring moments of wonder that pierce through the exhaustion. The way the midnight sun turns the ice field into a landscape of gold and amber, the absolute silence that descends when the wind stops, broken only by the distant crack of shifting ice. In these quiet moments, their individual personalities emerge most clearly from their writings. Andrée, ever the leader, calculating distances and planning the next day's route. Strindberg, the romantic, finding beauty even in their harsh circumstances. Frankel, the practical one, checking equipment and tending to the small repairs that keep them moving forward. But perhaps, most remarkably, they maintain their scientific work, taking meteorological readings, collecting samples, documenting their position with the careful precision of true explorers. Even in extremity, even when every ounce of energy might be devoted to simple survival, they remember why they came: to push the boundaries of human knowledge, to bring back something valuable from this white wilderness. Andrée writes, "We came here to explore, not just to survive. Each measurement we take, each observation we record, this is still exploration, still discovery. The method has changed, but not the purpose. This dedication to purpose beyond mere survival, how essential it becomes when the way forward is uncertain. The weight you carry includes this same responsibility, to remember why you began, to maintain your standards even when circumstances strip away everything you thought you could count on." As the days pass, their respect for the Arctic deepens. Not the grudging acknowledgement of an adversary, but something approaching reverence for a force that is neither cruel nor kind, but simply vast, beyond human comprehension. They begin to read the ice like a language, understanding which formations are stable, which are newly formed, where the currents below might be creating weakness or strength. The ice teaches them patience. The way it refuses to be hurried demands that they work within its rhythms rather than imposing their own. Some days it allows rapid progress. Other days it seems to conspire against them, opening leads of water just where they need to cross, shifting to create new obstacles overnight. But they adapt. They learn. They find reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed. In Frankel's increasingly economical entries, we see this evolution. Day 15. Ice difficult but passable. Made good progress. Equipment holding. Morale steady. That final phrase. Morale steady. Not high, not low. Steady. Like a flame that has found its proper fuel and burns without wavering. This is perhaps the greatest achievement of their long walk, not the miles covered, but the steadiness maintained in the face of uncertainty. The horizon ahead remains unchanged, an endless line where white ice meets pale sky, offering no promise of when this test might end. But they have found their rhythm now, the pace that can be sustained, the daily routine that conserves energy while maintaining progress, the careful balance between hope and realism that allows them to continue. And in continuing, in placing one foot in front of the other across this vast white silence, they discover something that perhaps they could not have found any other way. That the human spirit, when stripped of everything except its essential core, reveals itself to be remarkably resilient, remarkably capable of finding meaning in the simple act of moving forward, together, toward whatever waits beyond the horizon. The long walk continues, as it must, as all meaningful journeys do, one step at a time across the endless ice. Moments of respite and reflection. As the days blur into one another across this frozen wilderness, there come moments when the relentless forward motion must pause, when even the most determined spirit requires rest. And in these brief respites, something beautiful emerges from the harsh arithmetic of survival. Picture them now, if you will. 3 figures huddled around a small camp stove, its blue flame dancing against the Arctic twilight. The wind has finally stilled. The ice beneath them feels solid enough to trust for a few precious hours. And for the first time in days, they are not walking, not calculating distances, not studying the treacherous patterns of pressure ridges ahead. They are simply present. 3 men sharing warmth and whatever meager sustenance they have managed to preserve from their balloon stores. And in this circle of flickering light, surrounded by an infinity of ice and sky, they rediscover something that the urgency of survival had temporarily obscured. They remember who they are, beyond their roles as explorer, meteorologist, engineer, beyond the weight of expectations from a world that seems impossibly distant now. They are simply human beings, finding connection in the most unlikely of places. You know this feeling, don't you? Those rare moments when the constant pressure lifts, when the endless calculations of what needs doing tomorrow fade into background, and you remember that beneath all the responsibility you carry, beneath all the complexity of what you're building, there exists something simpler, something that doesn't need to be optimized or improved or solved. Strindberg pulls out his camera, a remarkable instrument for such a journey, heavy, cumbersome, requiring precious space in their already overburdened sledges. Yet he has carried it faithfully across the ice, understanding something that perhaps his companions are only now beginning to appreciate, that this moment, this impossible convergence of human ambition and natural grandeur, deserves to be remembered. Not just in the dry language of scientific journals or expedition reports, but in images that capture something more elusive, the play of light across endless ice, the particular way their tent looks, small and defiant against the Arctic immensity, the expressions on their faces as they share a meal that might be their last, or their first step toward salvation. Click, the shutter captures Andrée, beard frosted with ice, eyes still holding that remarkable calm that has sustained them through each crisis. Click. Frankel adjusting some piece of equipment with the focused attention of a craftsman who understands that small details can mean the difference between life and death. And in the act of documenting, something shifts. These men begin to see their ordeal not just as something to be endured, but as something that might, someday, inspire others. Their struggle becomes part of a larger story, one that extends beyond their individual survival to touch something universal about human resilience. The weight you carry. It can feel so isolating sometimes, can't it? As if you're the only one who truly understands the complexity of the challenges before you. The only one who grasps how much depends on the decisions you make each day. But here, around this small flame in the Arctic darkness, 3 men discover what you too might remember in your quieter moments. That the deepest experiences of leadership, of pushing beyond what seems possible, these connect us across time and circumstance. Andrée's calm in the face of impossible odds. It echoes in every leader who has ever had to project confidence while privately calculating the odds of failure. Strindberg's careful documentation. It mirrors your own understanding that what you're building matters not just for its immediate results, but for what it might teach others who follow. The camera captures more than images. It captures intention. the deliberate choice to bear witness, to create something lasting from circumstances that could easily be consumed by mere survival. And in making this choice, in deciding that their experience deserves to be remembered, these men transform their ordeal into something approaching art. You understand this impulse, this need to create meaning from difficulty. In your own journey, you've learned that the moments of greatest challenge often become, in retrospect, the experiences that most clearly defined who you were becoming. The late nights when everything seemed impossible. They weren't just obstacles to overcome. They were the crucible in which your deeper capabilities were forged. Around their small fire, the three explorers share more than warmth and food. They share stories, memories of the world they left behind. Strindberg speaks of his fiancée, Anna, waiting in Stockholm with a faith that must feel simultaneously sustaining and heartbreaking. Andrée reflects on the balloon flights of his youth, the pure joy of rising above the familiar landscape and seeing it transformed by altitude and perspective. These memories don't weaken them, as you might expect in such desperate circumstances. Instead, they provide ballast, reminders of what they're fighting to return to, but also of who they were before this ice claimed them. The continuity of identity that survives even the most extreme disruption. The fire burns lower, fuel too precious to waste on comfort alone. Soon they will bank the flame, crawl into their shared tent, and try to find rest on the unforgiving ice. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, new calculations about direction and supplies, the endless arithmetic of survival in a place that was never meant for human habitation. But tonight, for these few hours, they have created something remarkable, a pocket of warmth and connection in the heart of desolation. A moment when the weight of their circumstances transforms from burden into shared purpose. They are no longer three isolated individuals struggling against impossible odds. They are a team, a small community bound together by common purpose and mutual dependence. The camera sits beside Strindberg, loaded with images that will wait decades to be developed. Pictures that will someday tell the world not just what these men endured, but how they chose to endure it. With dignity, with attention to beauty even in the harshest circumstances, with the understanding that how we face our greatest challenges, this becomes the truest measure of who we are. The Arctic wind begins to rise again, a reminder that this respite is temporary, but the warmth they have shared around this small flame, the connection they have rediscovered in each other's company, this will travel with them across whatever ice lies ahead. Some things cannot be frozen, cannot be diminished by any external circumstance. The human capacity for hope, for finding meaning in struggle, for creating light in the deepest darkness. These remain, as constant as the stars that wheel overhead in the Arctic night, as enduring as the ice itself. Challenges and setbacks, and yet, as the days stretch into weeks, the ice beneath their feet begins to tell a different story. What had seemed solid, dependable, now reveals its true nature. The pack ice is not the stable platform they had hoped for, but a living thing, constantly shifting, constantly changing. Each morning brings new challenges that test not just their bodies, but their very will to continue. You know this feeling, don't you? When the ground beneath what you're building, what you've invested everything in, begins to shift in ways you never anticipated. When the assumptions you've built your plans upon start to crack like ice under pressure. The sound comes first, a deep groaning that seems to rise from the very bones of the earth. The pressure ridges. Those towering walls of broken ice are moving. Massive blocks the size of buildings, grinding against each other with a force that makes the air itself tremble. Andrée stops, his hand raised to halt his companions. They have learned to read these sounds, to understand the language the ice speaks. This is not the gentle settling they have grown accustomed to. This is something far more dangerous. "We'll need to find another way," he says quietly, his breath forming small clouds in the bitter air. But as they look around them, they realize the truth that leaders sometimes face in their darkest moments. There is no other way, only through. The pressure ridge towers before them, a chaotic maze of ice blocks thrust skyward by forces beyond human comprehension. Some pieces stand 20 feet high, balanced precariously against their neighbors. Others lie scattered like the ruins of some ancient civilization, sharp-edged and treacherous. Strindberg adjusts his pack, feeling the weight of his precious photographic equipment. Each piece represents not just their scientific mission, but their connection to the world they left behind. Yet now, every ounce matters. Every step must be calculated. "We take it slowly," Andrée decides, "one at a time. Test each foothold. How often have you stood before such obstacles? When the path forward seems impossible, when every option carries risk, when the weight you carry feels too heavy for the uncertain ground ahead. Yet still, you must choose. Still, you must move forward." Frankel goes first, his young legs finding purchase on the jagged ice. Each movement is deliberate, careful. The ice groans beneath him, a reminder that this frozen landscape tolerates their presence, but does not welcome it. Behind him, Andrée and Strindberg follow, their movements synchronized by necessity and trust. They have learned to move as one organism, each man's safety dependent on the other's judgment. But the ice has other plans. Without warning, a section of the ridge shifts, not dramatically, not with the thunderous collapse they might have expected. Just a subtle settling, a readjustment that changes everything. Frankel's foothold disappears, and suddenly he is falling, his pack dragging him down between two massive blocks. "Hold on!" Strindberg calls, already moving, already calculating angles and possibilities. This is what crisis looks like. Not the dramatic moments we imagine, but the quiet shifts that change everything in an instant. They work together, Andrée anchoring the rope while Strindberg descends into the gap. Their movements are precise, born of necessity and the deep trust that only shared hardship can create. They know that here, in this moment, there is no room for hesitation, no luxury of doubt. When they finally pull Frankel to safety, his face is pale, his breathing sharp in the cold air. But he is whole. They are still three. Yet the incident has cost them, not just in time and energy, but in something more precious. Their supplies, carefully rationed and jealously guarded, have been scattered. Some items lost forever in the depths of the ice maze. As they gather what remains, the mathematics of survival become stark. Fewer calories, less fuel for their precious stove. The margin for error, already thin, has become thinner still. You understand this arithmetic, don't you? The constant calculation, the weighing of resources against time, against the distance that still stretches ahead. When every decision carries weight, when there is no abundance to cushion mistakes. That evening, as they make camp in the lee of another pressure ridge, the mood is different. The easy conversation of previous nights, the stories that had warmed them more than their small fire, these come harder now. Strindberg still takes his photographs, but his movements are more deliberate, more conscious of the precious plates that remain. Each image must count now, must justify its weight in their packs. Andrée studies his charts by the flickering light, recalculating distances, adjusting their route to account for the day's detours. The numbers tell a story he does not want to read, but cannot ignore. They are moving too slowly. The ice, their constant companion and adversary, is carrying them not toward safety, but parallel to it. Each step forward is partially undone by the drift of their frozen platform. "We'll need to change our approach," he says finally, his voice carrying the weight of leadership in its most difficult form, the weight of admitting that the plan, carefully crafted and desperately needed, is not working. But here, in this moment of recognition, something else emerges. Not despair, though despair would be understandable. Not panic, though the situation calls for urgency. Instead, the quiet determination that defines true resilience. They will adapt. They will find another way. Because this is what leaders do, what builders do, when faced with the impossible. They continue. The wind picks up as they settle into their sleeping bags, carrying with it the scent of open water. Somewhere ahead, the ice gives way to the dark Arctic Sea. Another challenge, another test of their resolve and resourcefulness. But tonight, they rest. They conserve their strength for tomorrow's obstacles. They trust in their ability to find solutions, even when the solutions are not yet visible. Because some things endure, even in the face of mounting odds. The human capacity to adapt, to persist, to find hope in the darkest circumstances. These qualities, tested now by ice and wind and dwindling supplies, prove themselves as reliable as any compass, as essential as any tool in their packs. The Arctic night settles around them, vast and indifferent. But they are not alone in their struggle. They carry with them the strength that comes from shared purpose, from the knowledge that what they attempt, what they endure, serves something larger than themselves. And in that knowledge, there is a kind of peace. Kvitoya and eternal rest. The ice carries them forward, not by their choosing now, but by currents older than memory. Through September and into October, their small camp moves with the pack, drifting south and east toward waters they had never intended to see. Andrée marks their position each day with the methodical precision that has sustained them through everything. The numbers tell a story of surrender, not to defeat, but to forces beyond any human calculation. They are passengers now on this vast white ship, carried toward whatever shore the Arctic chooses for them. You understand this feeling, don't you? When the weight you carry shifts from active struggle to acceptance. When the decisions that once felt so urgent, the plans that demanded such fierce attention, gradually release their hold on your restless mind. There is relief in this surrender, a peace that comes not from victory, but from the simple recognition that some currents are stronger than our will to fight them. The island appears on October 5th, a low, dark line against the endless white. Kvitoya, White Island, though there is little white about it. Black rock and ancient ice, a place so remote that no human foot has ever touched its shores. Yet here they come. 3 men who set out to fly to the top of the world, finding instead this small sanctuary at its edge. They pull their sledge up onto the rocky beach, and for the first time in nearly 3 months, they stand on solid ground. The sensation must feel strange after so long on the shifting ice. This stillness beneath their feet, this permanence after endless motion. Strindberg sets up his camera once more, capturing this moment of arrival. In the photograph, they appear small against the vast landscape. 3 figures who have traveled further from home than almost any human beings in history. There is no triumph in their postures, but there is something else, a quiet dignity, the bearing of men who have seen wonders beyond description and endured trials that would break lesser spirits. They establish their final camp in the shelter of the island's low cliffs, protected from the worst of the Arctic winds. Here, surrounded by the debris of ancient ice and the stark beauty of this forgotten place, they settle into routines that have become as natural as breathing. Andrée continues his observations, measuring wind and temperature, recording the slow dance of ice and water around their island refuge. Frankel tends to their remaining supplies with the same careful attention he has shown throughout their journey. And Strindberg, faithful Strindberg, documents these last days with his camera and his pen, preserving moments that no other eyes will see. The entries in their diaries grow shorter now, but no less careful, no less human. They write of small comforts, a successful hunt, a moment of warmth by their improvised stove, the strange beauty of aurora dancing across the polar night. Even here, at the edge of the world, at the limit of their endurance, they find reasons to record, to remember, to bear witness to the extraordinary nature of ordinary moments. You carry this same capacity, though you may not recognize it in the fluorescent urgency of your daily battles. The ability to find meaning in small victories, to document progress in the margins of overwhelming challenge, to maintain your essential humanity, even when the weight you're building seems too heavy for any single person to bear. The Arctic winter closes around Kvitoya with final authority. Temperatures that make survival impossible, winds that strip away the last pretense of human control. Yet, in their final entries, there is no despair, no rage against the dying of their light. Instead, a kind of acceptance, a recognition that they have given everything they had to give, that they have pushed further into the unknown than anyone before them, that what they have accomplished transcends the simple mathematics of success and failure. The last photograph shows their camp, neat and orderly even in these final days, a testament to the discipline that carried them across hundreds of miles of impossible terrain. Their equipment arranged with care, their shelter constructed with the same attention to detail that launched them into the Arctic sky 4 months earlier. And then, silence. The kind of profound quiet that settles over all great endeavors when they reach their natural conclusion. Not the silence of defeat, but of completion, of having given everything to a dream worth the giving. For 33 years, Kvitoya keeps their secret. The island holds them in its ancient embrace while the world wonders, while search parties scour other waters, while their story becomes legend and speculation. Until 1930, when Norwegian sealers discover their final camp, preserved in the Arctic cold like a message in a bottle, waiting for the right moment to reveal its truth. The artifacts they left behind tell the story of men who never lost their essential purpose, their commitment to knowledge, their care for one another. Scientific instruments maintained until the end, photographs developed in makeshift darkrooms, diaries filled with observations that advance human understanding of this magnificent desolation. This is what remains when everything else falls away. The core of who you are beneath all the weight you carry, beneath all the urgent demands of what you're building. Your essential nature, tested by circumstances you never imagined, proving itself as enduring as the Arctic ice, as vast as the polar sky under which Andrée and his companions found their final rest. The wind across Kvitoya carries their story now, mingles it with the eternal conversation between ice and stone, between human ambition and natural law, between the dreams we chase and the peace we find when the chasing finally ends. And in that peace, in that vast Arctic silence, where three brave souls discovered the ultimate frontier, was not geographic, but spiritual. Not a place on any map, but a state of grace found in surrender to forces larger than ourselves. There is rest. There is completion. There is the kind of deep and lasting quiet that comes to all who dare greatly and accept fully the magnificent uncertainty of the journey itself.